Hello there everyone, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns and today I'm going to show you how to make this embellished 4-strand braid wirework bracelet. And this is the one that I've made. So you can see this is a 4-strand braid in the technique that we're making, and for 2 of the strands I'm using double wires actually, and that really emphasizes the braid structure. And on the other 2 strands I'm using a single wire, which then gives us the opportunity to add in the beads along the edges. And I've just used these bicones because they slot in really nicely on the little corners there, but also I just really like adding in some bling. But you can use other kinds of beads as well. So this is what the braid and the bracelet looks like. So if you want to learn how to make this, then keep watching. So it's these materials here that we're going to need. The wire that I'm using is a 0.8mm regular round copper wire, and this is going to be used for the whole braid. And then we're going to need some beads. Now the ones that I'm using here are some blue Swarovski bicone beads with an AB coating, so they're going to add a lovely sparkle to the piece. But you can easily use a different kind of bead. So for instance, 4mm rounds would also work, or even a different shape than that. It's completely up to you and your preference. And then we have our findings as well. So what I'm going to use here to finish off the ends of the braid with is these ribbon ends. And to them, because they have these little loops, I can then attach my lobster claw clasp and extender chain using the jump rings. So let's get it all together and let's get started. And then as for the lengths of wire that we'll need, what I have here is 6 lengths of about 40 centimeters each, and just make sure they're nice and straight so we don't have any kinks in them. Then what I've done is towards one end of them all, I've just put them into the spring clamp here just to hold them all together, and then this is our starting point. So then we need to start the braid. So to begin with here, what I'm going to do is just make a little section with just the wire before we start adding in any beads, just to kind of get the rhythm going, but also so we have that end to finish off the braid with at the end there. And then what I'm going to do is just separate my wires out a little bit. So I'm going to put 3 more towards one side and the other 3 towards the other side, just to kind of get them separated into the groups a little bit already. So how we're going to be working with them. And then we need to start off the initial braiding. So then what I'm going to do is take the outer wire, single wire there by itself on either side first to move. But I'm just going to do one at a time. So this right one here, what I'm going to do is bring that over in towards the middle. So over the other 2 that are in that same group. And then just in towards the middle like this. And then I'm going to bring the outer one on the left side there under towards the middle. Now it doesn't matter whether you start and bring the right one there over and the left one under, or you do it the opposite way, as long as you make sure to stay consistent throughout. I just naturally take the right one over and the left one under, but you can do it opposite. But like I said, just make sure you stay consistent. And then in the middle here, we need to make sure these 2 also cross over and under the right way. So right now, the right one is going over those 2, but then also over the one in the middle. It needs to actually go under the one in the middle there. That then forms that braid. So the one from the left that comes under the 2 actually goes over the one. So basically it's constantly opposite. And then we just want to kind of tighten it up in the middle there. And then again we have the wires just going out towards the sides, and they're kind of just swap places now, those 2 single ones. Then we need to do the same again, but using the 2 wires on either side together. So that's the only difference, is now I'm going to take the 2 outer wires on the right side. Before I do that, actually I'm just going to press down that wire, single wire on that side a little bit as well, so you can see from the side kind of goes down a bit. It just helps tighten up the braid a bit more. But then I'm going to take these 2 and make sure I kind of grab hold of them, so I make sure they lie flat next to each other as I move them, and they stay that way. Then bring that over that single wire and into the middle. And once I've done that, I can then bring the single wire back up on the same level. And then on the other side here, we'll basically do the opposite. So that single wire, first of all, I'm just going to push up a little bit instead, like that. And then the double wires, make sure I keep them together while I move them. I bring underneath and then into the middle. And then if your wires now naturally cross over the ones in the middle there, then obviously that's already in place, but you can also bring them under and then do that after, it doesn't matter. But then first of all, I'm just going to straighten this single one back out, bring it to the same level again. And in the middle there, like I said, mine are already crossing over in the right way, but you could have ended up with the double ones. The one from the left there goes underneath, going under the one in the middle as well. So if you do that, you literally just swap them around. So you make sure again that it's opposite, just like in the single ones up there, because again that's how we actually form the braid, to basically constantly make sure they're always going over, under, over, under. That's the purpose of that. So that's basically the technique. Now I'm just going to do a couple more stitches in the braid before I then add in any beads. So again, I'm just going to start on my right side, that outer single one, I bring over and into the middle. And we can always just push the double ones down a little bit as well. And on the other side, we can just push them up a little bit to then bring the single one under and into the middle. And again, you can see that one just naturally then slid over the single one in the middle that's already there, which is then already in place. And then we just push double ones back down to be level. And then what I also recommend is you keep an eye on your braid throughout, because if you want to adjust anything, if you're not quite happy with something, rather kind of work on it while you're there, because that's easier, because once we've done the whole braid we can't really fix too much further back in the braid. So if you need to fix anything, do that, but otherwise do a couple of stitches of this, and then I'm going to show you how to add in the beads. So now I've got a little length out of my braid, it's time to start adding the beads in, and I've ended up so my single wires are on the outside because those are the ones we're adding the beads to. So before I actually move these, I want to add the beads because they're going to sit on the outer edge of the braid. So I'm just going to do one at a time. So I'm adding one bead to this length of wire, and then on the other side I'm going to do the same thing. So add my other bead just on the end there and let it drop all the way down. So they're both now ready and they're going to sit on the edge. And then otherwise we just need to do the exact same movements. So first of all, you just want to push down the double wires a little bit. So I'm just starting with my right one. Make sure the bead stays up there and push it all the way up. And then as you bring this single wire around into the middle but over those double wires, that bead needs to stay in that little corner, you could say, and it gets trapped in there. But then bring the wire all the way into the middle, and then we can bring those double wires back up to the same level like that. And then on the other side we do the same but opposite, obviously. So the double wires will bring up instead of down, and then the outer single wire there we bring underneath the double wires, making sure that that bead stays on the outer edge and just kind of slots in to that little corner. That's why you can see as well, I think the bicones fit really nicely because they kind of just slot into that little corner that's created by the structure of the braid. But then bring that into the middle. And what I like to do as well as I'm working with my wire in the braid, as I'm moving it, you're going to find that because of the warmth of your hands and the shape as well, that it's going to kind of get a little bit out of shape. So what I always do as I'm moving it, before I move on to the next movement, I smooth it out with my hands just to make sure it's ready for the next round. And I avoid getting the kinks and bends in there because obviously we don't want that to actually end up in the braid itself. So bring that in there and then flatten those double wires back out to make it all level again. And then you have those two beads sitting right on the edge, right opposite each other on either side. And now the next round is where we have the double wires on the outside. So we just make this round without adding beads in, because obviously we can't really add one of the beads on both of those wires. So that just is done the same way as I showed you before. Bring the double wire over the single wire and then I just straighten it back out. And on the other side I push up the single wire to then bring the double wires under it and into the middle. And again here you can see it crosses over in the middle in the right way. So do pay attention to that they're basically opposite each other every time they go over or under another wire, opposite to the last time they went over or under a wire. And there we have another round or stitch of the braid. And then you can see now we have the single wires on the outside again. So that means that we're now ready to add in the next set of beads. So I'm just adding again one bead to the single outer wire on the right, and then I'm adding my other bead to the single outer wire on the left. And then of course, just like before, once I get it on there, let it drop all the way down so they sit in that little corner, and then we just repeat again. So obviously that just means pushing the double wires down, and then you bring, in my case the right one first, make sure the bead stays in that corner and bring that in towards the middle but over those double wires, and then again that bead just slots in perfectly that little corner. So you can see there on the other side, push up the double wires to then make sure the bead stays in the corner and bring it underneath and in towards the middle. So there we go. And then we'll cross them over in the middle in the right way. Flatten these back out. And then that's another round. So you can see you get this really nice effect of the braid structure. It's quite symmetrical. And then because we're adding that single wire on some of the strands there, that can then carry those beads on the edges. So you obviously just keep doing this all the way until you reach the length of the braid that you want. So now that I continued braiding, you can see this is what we end up with. Have that nice braid all the way up with the beads on the edges. And then down here what I've just done is I made a couple more rounds without adding in beads, just again so we have that little length that we can use to finish it off with. So that's what we need to do now. I'm gonna take my ribbon ends and be able to finish off the ends there so we get a nice professional finish, and also we have these little loops that we can attach our findings to. So then we need to cut off the excess wire on the ends of the braid. So I'm going to be using my flush cutters for that. So I get my braid in here, and then one end at a time. I want to cut it off obviously so we get rid of the excess wire but we have the right length left. So I'm just going to be using my ribbon end to kind of measure, see where I want it to sit, so that when I cut off the excess, that's going to fit nicely inside the ribbon end there. So I know where I want to cut is basically by where I have the single wire on the outside, the first one after the last bead, pretty much in the middle of that. So just cut through the wires and then all the way over to the other side, as straight a line as possible. So something like that. And then what we want to do, just going to get the excess wire out of the way. Then on the end here, if we can just check it, see it's going to fit nicely, but what I like to do is add a bit more security to it, because I'm going to add glue inside the ribbon end, so obviously that's going to add security, but to avoid over time that, because it's more or less straight wire, you can just kind of pull that off the glue, I like to just always put a bend in on the very end of the wire. So I'm just going to take one at a time, and the inner ones where it's double wire there, I'm just going to kind of grab onto them. If you need to do it one at a time, and just on the very end about 1 or 2 millimeters, using my chain nose pliers, put a bit more of a bend, and also so they lie a bit more straight right there on the end. And you can also squeeze it down to make it still somewhat flat so it's not adding too much bulk. And then the other one, I do the same thing. Again, press it flat. And while I do this as well, I just want to make sure that, like I said, it's going to be more or less level, so we don't have one wire or something sticking straight out and adding length to it. Because remember, this needs to fit inside the ribbon end nicely. And then the outer ones, I always like to bend inwards, just to make sure they don't stick out the sides of the ribbon end. So just grab onto one at a time, and then bend it inwards. Something like that. Same with the other one. And then you can see we still get a nice level finish there. We can always adjust it until we have that. And we can just try it inside the ribbon end just to make sure it sits nicely. You can see it fits there. And it's going to sit nice and level. So now what we need to do is add some glue to the inside of this ribbon end. And the glue that I'm going to be using is this E6000. It's really strong and it also dries clear, so if anything spills out, it's not going to be too obvious. And I also find that it works really well for metal, which is obviously what we're working with. And then I just like to use a toothpick here to help apply it, because we just need a little bit inside the ribbon end. We really don't need too much, because it's just going to come spilling out anyway. So I have a bit of glue there. Then I take my ribbon end and just get it right inside, up and down the sides there. Make sure you cover the inside of the ribbon end. And as you can see, we don't need to leave all this glue in there because it basically fills it out. But remember, the actual end of the braid is going to fit in there, so we don't need all this glue. It's literally just really to coat the inside of it, but we still have a bit of a gap. Then what I always like to do with the excess glue that I have left is actually put it on the end of the braid and make sure it gets right in there between the wires, between the ridges, because then when we adhere the two pieces together, that's going to really make it more durable long term. So just get the excess glue in there. Again, it doesn't have to be too much, just make sure you kind of coat the area. Then I put the two pieces together, so I put the ribbon end over the end of the braid, put it in place, then I grab my flat nose pliers and I start squeezing it down. Now don't go in and squeeze it all the way down straight away. I like to just do it gradually to make sure it doesn't, while we're squeezing, slip to one side or the other. Obviously we want it to stay as centered as possible, because then we can still move it around a bit until we squeeze it all the way. So just make sure it sits properly, and then when you're happy with that, you can give it a nice squeeze. That's going to tighten really nicely around the end of the wires there. And I always like to go in from the sides as well to close up them, so otherwise they might be a bit too open. And this is where I meant as well with the wire, I like to bend it inwards, because otherwise you might find that it sticks out of the sides there. But then that's all you do, and then obviously what you want to do is just let the glue dry, repeat this on the other end, and then we can use these loops to attach our findings, and then all that's left to do once you've done that is really shape the bracelet. So to shape the bracelet, you can either fold it around something that has a size and shape that you want it to have, so for instance like a bracelet mandrel, or you can just use your hands and fingers. So what you just do is go in to a place on the braid and you start putting a curve into it. So I don't go into one place and just make a big bend. I go in and gradually put more and more of a curve, moving from one side here and then back across to the other. And you can see we're gradually getting a curve in it. And basically I'm just going back and forth from side to side until it has the shape that I want, and the two ends there and obviously the clasp meet up, so we can actually use the bracelet as it's intended. So I then finished shaping the bracelet, and then this is what it looks like, and it's ready to wear. So we have a braid structure going all the way around there, and using those double strands of wire really emphasizes the braid structure, but then using the single strands of wire we're able to add in those beads and some color, obviously if you want to use contrasting colors with the wire and the beads, and also in this case some bling because I'm using the bicones. So that's what it looks like. So I have loads of other tutorials on my channel and quite a few for wire braiding as well. It's one of my personal favorite things to do, braiding with wire. So feel free to check that out. But I really hope you enjoyed this one here. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.